Hello everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to Music Forever, where today I'm going to be reviewing the newest album from Rae Jepsen, Dedicated. Overall, I wasn't really sure what to expect from this record. Emotion was a great record. I thought it was one of the best pop albums of that year and probably one of the stronger pop albums of this decade, but I wasn't really sure where she was going to go coming off of that project. And overall, I think that this is a pretty solid follow-up to Emotion. I don't think it's quite as good as Emotion, in part due to the fact that at times this thing does feel a bit similar to that project in terms of its overall sound. However, this is still a really good album at the end of the day, and definitely one of the stronger pop albums I've heard so far this year. On this record, Rae plays to a lot of the same strengths that she did on Emotion, mostly focusing on making some really straightforward, but at the same time really great, well-written, and well-produced pop songs. All the tracks on this thing are filled with some really catchy hooks. They have some really great production as well. They're all really straightforward and to the point. They are pop songs at the end of the day. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that these tracks are boring, uninteresting, or anything like that. There's a lot of energy and emotion put into these tracks as well. For the upcoming tracks on the record, you have a nice mix of some different sounds. For example, you have some more upbeat, fun pop songs, tracks like Now That I Found You, or Want You in My Room, for example, just really fun, enjoyable pop tracks. Or you might have some more subdued tracks on here as well, songs like Everything He Needs, or Too Much, for example. This variety in the track listing does help keep the album feeling fresh and interesting with every track, despite the fact that a lot of these songs do share some pretty similar qualities to each other, whether it be really catchy hooks or similar sounding production. But overall, yeah, the diversity in some of these tracks does help keep them really interesting. The lyrics over the course of this record aren't lyrics that I would classify as being particularly deep or insightful or anything quite like that. For the most part, they focus on topics related to things like relationships and things of that sort. A lot of the same similar stuff that you might see in a lot of other pop music out there. I mean, this album is unabashedly a pop album, as I've said multiple times at this point. However, despite the fact that the lyrical themes covered here on this record aren't anything particularly new, they are very nicely written for the most part. They don't come across sloppy or cheesy or just really cliched or anything quite like that for the most part. They still manage to sound pretty entertaining and well put together, even if the topics that they're covering are a bit, tired at this point. Overall, I quite like the first two-thirds of this record quite a bit. I think it's really solid. I think the flow of the tracks is really nice. You get a lot of diversity in terms of the sounds here as well. It's a really enjoyable listen to the first two-thirds of this record. It's not really to the last third where I think things start to fall apart a little bit. However, before I get to my negatives with this last third of the record, I do want to say that the closing track to this album, Real Love, is another one of the highlights in the track listing and overall just a great conclusion to this record. It's another one of those tracks on the record that's a bit more subdued overall. I think Rae's performance on the track really helps sells a lot of the emotion here in the lyrics, and lyrically it is one of the more interesting tracks on the record as well. Overall, just a fantastic conclusion to the record, and easily the best song in the third leg of the track listing. When it comes to this stuff I don't really care for as much in the last third of this record. I wouldn't go as far as to say that any of this stuff ruins the album or anything. It's just notably weaker than the first two-thirds or so of this record. I think the track The Sound has some interesting qualities to it, especially in really everything that leads up to the hook here on this track. I think it's pretty solid. However, I don't like the chorus of this track and how redundant it is at times. It kind of falls into that category of tracks that just kind of repeat the same phrase over and over for its hook. And it ruins a lot of the momentum and enjoyable qualities that's present in the rest of this track, which is pretty unfortunate because, like I said, I think everything leading up to the hook here in this track is really solid. In fact, if the hook was stronger here on this track, I may even go as far as to say that this could have been one of the best songs on this album. The track Feels Right featuring Electric Guest is another one of my least favorite songs on this thing, if not my least favorite track overall. I just don't like the vocals that he brings to the table here on this track. And I'm not familiar with this artist in particular, but yeah, I just didn't really care for what they brought to the table here on this song. I think that the overall vibe of this track is just a bit too upbeat, a bit too safe and clean sounding. It feels like a kind of song that I'd hear during a commercial on like daytime television or something, which maybe I'm the only person out there that feels that way, but I just really did not like the vibe that this track was giving me overall. I didn't like the chorus of this track either. I think Electric Guest's vocals on this thing just sound a bit too clean and safe overall. Kind of reminds me of like Owl City with how overly clean and safe it sounds. And Rae's vocals during the hook here as well, I'm not the biggest fan of. She definitely tries something a bit new here with how her vocals sound, but I didn't really like how it ended up sounding at the end of this track. So yeah, this was easily my least favorite song on the album. Some tracks that appear later on in this record, like Right Words, Wrong Time and Automatically in Love, are songs that I don't think are particularly terrible, but at the same time, they're just not the most interesting in the track listing. And, when it comes to the overall style of these tracks, they're not too different from some of the songs that appear early on in the track listing, but when you compare them in terms of how interesting they are to some of these tracks, they just don't really hold up all that much. And the fact that they're kind of grouped together towards the end of this album, some of those weaker cuts I mentioned before, it just makes the overall last third of this record, with the exception of the closing track, which, like I said, I really love, it makes the whole last third of this record feel really weak compared to the first two-thirds or so. Overall, though, I still think that this is a really solid album at the end of the day. I think that some of the tracks you get here towards the start of the record are really fantastic, really well written, have some great hooks that are really catchy, some really well written verses as well, great production, great vocal performances on Carly Rae's part. It's just really enjoyable for the first two-thirds or so. It's not really to that last third of the album where things become a bit more spotty. Not terrible, like I said before, there are some good moments in this last third of the record, but there are some moments I just don't care for that much, or some tracks I think are just a bit boring compared to some of the songs earlier in the track listing. However, also like I said before, the last track on this record, Real Love, great track, definitely one you should check out from this album if you don't even plan on listening to this thing in full. At least give that track a listen, because it's pretty great. But yeah, overall, pretty solid pop album. Pretty good follow-up to Emotion, though not quite as good in my opinion. Definitely a pop album you should check out if you're looking for some really catchy, fun pop music. So yeah, this album definitely is an album that I enjoy, definitely gets a recommendation from me. But that is just my own personal opinion. If you happen to disagree, that's perfectly fine. In fact, feel free to leave your own opinion in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, make sure you leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more music-related content. Things like album reviews, track reviews, things of that sort. If you like that kind of content, make sure you subscribe. Thank you for watching once again, and stay golden.